fight anti-Semitism requires rejecting indifference. It requires commitment. It requires leadership. It requires political leadership, which cuts across political partisanship. The fight against anti-Semitism should always be bipartisan. That should not ever be questioned. And there are positive initiatives that reflect that. Both the Senate and the House now have bipartisan task forces on anti-Semitism, co-chaired by Democrats and Republicans, by Jews and Christians, all active in engaging on the issue. The State Department has a special envoy on anti-Semitism that President Trump appointed. He's not the first president to appoint it. It goes back to the Bush administration. But it's vigorously speaking out against anti-Semitism around the world. There is an office, another special envoy on Holocaust issues at the State Department that represents us on these issues in dealing with other nations. At the United Nations, the voice of our representatives have been strong. And even in the United Nations, the report of the Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief that I cited earlier was noteworthy for how strong, how vigorous, how much moral passion was brought to the report that was authored by Dr. Ahmed Shahid. So there's a lot of allies and a lot of people willing to speak up. But it does require even more of an effort in today, given the challenges that we face. We have called for the appointment of a focal person by the administration to deal with this issue in the domestic front. There is no one person, one place, one address. Anti-Semitism today is addressed possibly Department of Justice, possibly Department of Education, maybe housing, maybe Homeland Security, and so on. We'd like to see one address to pull these strands together, where the community would know where to go. We'd like to see, and we called for, and we're hoping for a congressional resolution very shortly, the creation of a special FBI task force to deal with anti-Semitism. One was created a couple of decades ago to deal with the arson attacks on black churches, and was notably successful in minimizing those attacks. The times demand that kind of vigorous response today. If we're serious about fighting anti-Semitism, we have to recognize that it exists both on left and right, in marginalized and affluent communities. It's not an occasion to point fingers and hurl accusations. It begins with an honest examination of those who we think are our allies and of our own houses. Today in America, Jewish life is as much under threat as Jewish lives. We don't want our children, or anyone's children, for example, choosing what university to attend based on how safe the campus is if they're visibly Jewish. We don't want to become like France, where the discussion now is not on the quality of Jewish life in France, but the viability, the existence, continued existence of Jewish life in France. We want to reach the ideals that George Washington famously said in his letter to the Jews of Newport, Rhode Island in 1790. He said, "The government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it all on occasions of their effectual support. May the children of the stock of Abraham, who dwell in this land, be to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make them afraid. May the Father of all mercy scatter light and not darkness upon our paths, and make us all in our several locations useful here, and in his own due time and way, everlastingly happy." Sharansky said, "Evil cannot be defeated, it cannot be recognized, and the only way to recognize evil is to draw clear moral lines." And I would add to that, and to have strong moral leadership and political leadership as well. That's the clarity and leadership that our founding father provided in 1790, and that's exactly the kind of leadership that I hope and pray, and I'm cheered by their presence here, of leaders who seem to be committed to that, but that they will provide to all Americans today.